Going to start with what's happening, for instance, in Ukraine and in Russia, with Riki Ellison, head of the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. He analyzes the weapon systems, the military strategy specifically about what's going on. So in the last few days, Putin the Powerful has said nuclear weapons are back on the table. This isn't the first time he said it, but he hasn't said it for a while now. He's making a point of stridently announcing to the world, mostly to the U.S., that he wants to put nuclear weapons on the table. What could this possibly mean? And then just 48 hours ago, he held some referendum where he claims that the citizens in the eastern part of Ukraine voted to join Russia. So they want annexation of their hometown. What do you do? But this is a sign of the times. I mean, this is a sign of the times. Men can have babies. Up is down, left is right. Ukraine's Russia, Russia's Ukraine, right? This is what we have to navigate now. It's not really anything new, but what is real and is deadly and is a huge problem economically, otherwise, migration-wise, is what's happening in the smack dab of a hot war in the middle of Europe. So I started by asking Riki what he made of Putin's speech and what we take seriously and what we don't take seriously, and of course why Putin, after 7 months of war, decided to make these claims and allegedly annex this war zone into Russia.
They tried a strategy that was not successful in what they attained, so they've now marked that territory to defend it like it is Russia, and they will defend it like it is Russia. So that is his statement. That is real, and the escalation of that has happened.
All right. So what does that mean? When somebody like Putin says, I can use nuclear weapons, and I'm telling you that I can use nuclear weapons, and I may use nuclear weapons. If you're the United States military, if you're the NATO defense, what do you do when he says this again?
Well, you certainly don't want to cave into that statement. So you still want to keep the supplies going and keep Ukraine fighting in that kind of gray area and not define it into a nuclear, Kennedy crisis position. That you want to continue to support it and erode his ability to take those territories the way we have been doing it, not as a NATO ally, but as a partner supporting a Western democracy to fight this.
I had a listener email this week, and he asked a question which I thought was a pretty good question. It seemed pretty simple, and those are usually the best questions. He said, is it possible to have a small or narrow nuclear strike?
Now, we have designed tactical nuclear weapons. That was in the height of the Cold War. They have refined those precision and reducing the amount of explosive device. But again, that is for a territory. The after effects, nobody knows what that's going to be if that does happen. But there is belief that a tactical nuclear war could be survivable and is realistic on that. And I don't think it'll get to that extreme. I think he will test nuclear tactical weapons in front of the world in his test ranges to show that he's going to do this before he does it, and to put the pressure to retain his new territories.
The nuclear attacks that we've known are from almost 100 years ago in Japan. Do these smaller tactical weapons look like that, just on a smaller, narrower scale? Is that what happens?
We are so far advanced in technology on everything we've done than 100 years ago. So that there's going to be nuclear fallout, absolutely. But I believe they have figured it out to fight with nuclear weapons. I mean, that's been a strategy that's been in existence since 1960. So it's not the end of the world having a nuclear as we've seen way back 100 years ago.
So you're saying nuclear weapons are different now than when we've seen either when they were used or were threatened to use at a high level like back in the 1960s?
But the question is what the response is after that happens. That's the question. And does that become a nuclear war? That is the question. So that's whether the Western democracies are going to stand together and accept those terms or defeat those terms of Russia owning that new territory.
Yeah. Well, the other question, if you've got these more advanced tactical nuclear weapons than we've ever seen, could Putin contain his any type of nuclear strike inside Ukraine, or is that almost impossible? And then the war ultimately becomes outside Ukraine. I mean, even if he fires inside Ukraine, NATO says, well, we're getting nuclear drift into Poland or into Slovakia.
Right. But that's going to be an after effect of that with the weather and so forth. But again, they put nuclear weapons on cruise missiles. They put nuclear weapons on artillery. This is not an atomic bomb that you remember being dropped off on a plane, thousands of pounds to do what that did. We're an advanced society. Again, it doesn't need to get to that point. It's going to be gamemanship between now and then on what that happens. But it looks like Putin has reached his limit of doing the strategies that he has done and is now enforced that this is now Russian territory and he's going to defend it like Russian territory.
Yeah, so we saw
the decision is going to be made.
Right, we saw that on Friday where he claims he held a referendum and he has now announced that that the eastern part of Ukraine he's annexed. So he says, he's just like kind of Crimea, he's rewriting the map, and he says now that part of Ukraine is Russia. So obviously the West rejects this, but what does that do for strategy now? So if you're the United States or NATO, what do you do now that he says a third of Ukraine is his?
Well, yeah, but you ignore that if you don't, from international office, and you continue with what you're doing, maybe accelerating that gray area of the capabilities that we've been giving Ukraine, the support we've put into Ukraine, as not just the United States, but everybody, to defeat him and to stalemate him. So we ignore that threat.
Well, one of the things that I believe the United States position has been is that they will only give Ukraine weapons to fight inside what everybody except for Russia now considers the borders of Ukraine. They won't go on the offensive into Russia, for instance.
We're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. They are not a NATO ally. They're a partner nation.
But
not NATO.
But could the
We're not going to strike in the Russian territory.
No. And so if Putin most likely says that the fighting that has been going on for 6 or 7 months is now fighting inside Russia, the United States just ignores that. So because as of Friday, the United States is supplying weapons to attack Russian soil, according to Putin.
That's not true, and that the Americans, not just the Americans, the Western European countries, are supporting Ukraine with weapons to defend their country as it was. So that's not Russian territory.
So by all accounts, it appears that the Ukrainians have taken back territory over the last few weeks and that the Russians have retreated. Is there any reason not to believe that? Yeah,
but this is Ukraine versus Russia. I mean, he's putting out more troops. They have more money. They have more. That's a very, great. They can maybe win a couple tactical battles, but I don't think the big war they're not going to win.
Ukraine won't win.
You're seeing that. Ukraine's not going to win that.
They're not going to win it.
They're going to take the territory, and they got it. You're taking on Russia.
Yeah.
How could Russia be a world power if a little country like that they can't beat? I mean, or Russia no longer becomes a world power as it was.
I've asked this to you before, probably around 6 months ago. Since Putin does have nuclear weapons, and it appears he is continuing to struggle inside Ukraine, how do you try to appease him? How do you try to? What's the end game for this guy? If you smell that he's losing, how do you make him not shoot off those nuclear weapons and get him out of there and calm things down?
I mean, I think it takes two to resolve a conflict. Yeah, look at North Korea, South Korea, and that situation in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a negotiation, DMZ, is there going to be a negotiation between both sides? So, the president of Ukraine's going to come to terms with this.
Do you think Putin?
Well, Putin's taking those territories. That's part of it. Yeah. Whether he takes more as it goes forward. I mean, some of these negotiations should have been done. I mean, the lives lost are a lot, and destruction, a lot, continuing every day.
This past week, we saw the Nord Stream 2 pipeline get sabotaged? You have any
Well, it's been happening. That's been happening since it was built.
Yeah.
So people
Okay.
have taken fuel from that pipeline. They can't police that.
Okay.
That's profiting, black marketing of the whole thing. That's been going on all the pipelines.
So this explosion that we saw is not, it's not even necessarily unusual, is what you're saying.
No, they've been blackjacking their, hijacking that fuel and leaks all the way through. And both sides, in both countries.
So this past week, the United States hosted a Pacific Summit. Is this maybe the first, at least formal, re-engagement there?
I think last week, if you saw what happened, the amount of missile use across the world, including North Korea, including Iran, including Ukraine, was remarkable in numbers. And we have a situation here that has to be dealt with, because we don't have capabilities across our nations and our allies and our partners to defend against it. And that's why those missiles are going to continue to increase, because that's a vulnerability that we have. And we're seeing it as power projection. You've got North Korea chipping in on top of this as well. That's a big concern for our ability to defend those islands in the Pacific, and to be able to use those islands for our Navy, for our Army, for our Air Force, to be able to have a capability to deter and, if need be, beat China in its expansion in that. So I think a lot of this discussion is an ability to see who's on our side, that we can be able to work with them in leveraging our ability to have a base or have a capability off their islands in support of this Western democracy and in support of the world order. That's what's going on.
Why are so many missiles being shot off? Like you said, I mean, our vice president went to Asia, and she was on the DMZ, and I think 5 missiles went off just during her time, brief time she was there, for instance. So why are there so many suddenly?
Because it's a point of negotiation, it's a point of strength, because we don't have the capabilities to defend that.
About a week or two ago, our President Biden again said that if China invades Taiwan, he would send U.S. troops inside Taiwan to fight China's military on the ground. It's not the first time he said it, but every time he says it, then the Pentagon says that's not really what he means. Why does he keep saying it? What's going on with this? Why does he keep saying it, and then we get a mixed message?
That's the truth. We're going to defend Taiwan.
Okay, on the ground.
We're going to defend it. I mean, whether it's on the ground or on the sea or under the water or around the airs, we're going to be part of that tonight.
But he specifically,
and clearly telling the Chinese that's what the deal is. And you're not supposed to do it, obviously, because it's supposed to be nebulous and gray, as was agreed upon. But there is intent there, and that's from the President of the United States. So that's going to back China off a little bit.
The walking back by the Pentagon and the White House spokespeople, explain that strategy. Why would they walk it back every time he's very specific and direct?
Well, because they get to inform him and advise him on this statement, and they obviously he said what he wanted to say without their having an opportunity for them to advise him on that statement.
Can the United States military defend Taiwan against China? I mean, on the ground.
I think the United States can effectively limit China's ability completely to take Taiwan. I mean, it's an island. We own the water, under and the top and the air. That's not going to happen right away. They don't have that capacity yet to do that. And you look in the little simple means of what Ukraine's doing to Russia, and Taiwan's got far more advanced weapons. And, they're going to have to completely annihilate that island if they want it.
Riki Ellison, Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, with analysis not only of Putin, the powerful Ukraine, Russia, but also what the United States is doing. A lot of it is a bit of catch-up In the Asian theater, Kamala was there this past week. She flubbed the North Korea line and talked about the Great Alliance, but she was in that region, I'm sure, to address nations like Japan and South Korea about what the United States is still trying to do there. And again, what is the strategy when Biden comes out and says boots on the ground, the Pentagon comes out and says not necessarily? I mean, again, is that chaos theory, or is it something different than that? Obviously, with the summit of the Pacific this past week, at the very least, that we know is a reaction to the island hopping that China has done, and for instance, the recent usurpation of Solomon Islands.